Hello everybody, today I'll be telling you how to raise your very own pet bass. Now this will apply to both largemouth and smallmouth as I've kept both, and I'll just give you some general care guides to both, tank size and stuff like that. So first off, we're going to go with getting your bass. Now this is entirely on you, but I suggest getting a smaller one. This guy only caught when he was about an inch, and now you can see he was about 5 inches. But yeah, I suggest getting a smaller one, but if you happen to catch a larger one, I've raised those too. They work fine. In fact, now let me show you my smallmouth bass, who's definitely a lot larger and in the outside tank. So anyways, here is my larger smallmouth bass, who is, I don't know, like 15 inches. He was raised from when he was only about 5 inches, about the size of the largemouth that you guys just saw. And basically, I'm just going to talk about this fish for a little bit, then we're going to go back inside and focus on the largemouth. So, if you want to skip ahead, you can skip ahead and go straight to the largemouth. But I suggest you get the smallmouth too, because this is going to be just a general care guide for all of the black bass fish. So, the smallmouth bass is native to northern USA, and I'm pretty sure Europe. But they basically just want a lot cooler, cleaner water than your largemouth bass that would want more warmer, less current. Smallmouth bass are also a little bit more aggressive than largemouth bass, and though he was at one time kept with the bass, it didn't go very well. When they're young, they go great together, but when they get older, they start to get mad at each other. So just keep that in mind when keeping your bass. For tank mates, his only tank mates are 2 catfish, which live underneath this little stone slab. It is about a 12 to 13 inch bullhead and I'd say about a 20 inch channel cat. Yep, that both of them are under there. It's like a clown car in there. Anyways, back to the bass. Oh, look at that. The bullhead made an appearance. I guess he wanted to steal the show, as he always does, and then he's gone. Anyways, so this bass, he's in a 300-gallon. I don't know if this is going to be his permanent home, but he's doing fine here. I feed him normally a diet of live minnows, which I catch from the stream that is near my house. Now, granted, these things can be trained onto dead food, but it is a hassle. But if you're willing to go onto it, you definitely can train them onto dead food. I believe that I've trained plenty of them onto dead food. The bass that you just saw eats pellets, so they can definitely be trained onto dead food. It'll just take them a while. So if you're getting a wild-caught bass, you're going to have to factor in the fact that you'll most likely, unless you're getting them when they're just a couple inches long, that you're most likely going to have to get yourself some live food there. And it's going to take them a while to accept dry food. That's like going to take a real long time. So if you're not up to the task of doing live feedings, then I suggest not keeping bass. Because when I first kept bass, I said that I wasn't going to do live feedings. That lasted about a day until I realized that he wanted to eat crickets. Then I said I wouldn't feed him fish. That lasted another couple months when he started eating fish. So basically, I do not suggest the feeder goldfish. Definitely not the feeder goldfish. If you have to have feeder fish because you live somewhere where there's no lakes, and instead of a feeder goldfish, maybe you can instead go for rosy red. Now, I do suggest quarantining these fish, as they can be a little bit sick sometimes. Now, granted, wild caught is always better because it's almost stronger and healthier, but if you have to do what needs to be done, and if you have to get feeder fish, try to get the healthier ones, and if for whatever reason you can't quarantine them, you can always go to your local fish store, which will probably have a little bit healthier ones than PetSmart, but just be warned, they can a lot of times have diseases. Now that brings me on to the second thing that you can feed them, which is shrimp. Now, live shrimp are a little bit less nutritious, and you're going to get a lot more, especially, and for larger bass like him, it's not going to work. But if you're just trying to get a smaller bass trained onto dead food, then ghost shrimp and feeder ghost shrimp could be the perfect opportunity for you, because feeder ghost shrimp, though it can still happen, have a lot less chance of transferring diseases, considering that they're a completely different classification of animal as fish. Now, granted, always take feeder stuff with caution, and there's always a chance that they have some sort of parasite that can transfer onto the bass. So just be careful of that. And now we're going to talk about what to do if your bass is sick. Now, this is kind of hard, because if you have a little 5-inch bass, it's not that hard to quarantine. You can throw him in like a 20-gallon if you have a quarantine tank or something to quarantine him in. It's not that hard. But when you're keeping an incredibly sized animal like this, and he's kind of relaxing right now, but he can really swim fast, you can't really just put him in a small tank. So really, if your bass does get sick and it's a larger one, I suggest just quarantining the entire tank and just not try to find whatever made him sick first and get rid of that. So if you think like a feeder fish brought it in, then maybe check your feeder fish more carefully. If you think that a new plant brought it in, take out the plant. Whatever that may be, just make sure that your bass is healthy. Now, I do not suggest taking them out of the tank because bass can be so large. Now, if it's a smaller one and you think you can be my guest, just be careful on the fact that bass are very good jumpers. So when trying to transfer them from tank to tank, you can a lot of times have them jump out of the net. So always keep your hand over the net when transferring. Next, we're going to talk about something a little bit more general. Then we're going to move on to some more things about the largemouth bass. Then the video will come to conclusion. So catching your bass is a very hard task because, unfortunately, bass are kind of hard to get in a fish store. It's definitely possible, and I've seen occasionally, like online, you can go on online sources, you can buy it, but if you're either not comfortable with online or want to go on a little bit of an adventure, catching a wild caught bass, I've done it plenty of times. I have had a couple issues. They sometimes have diseases, and sometimes, things happen. But on most of the time, wild fish are generally pretty healthy. I do suggest quarantining them if you can. If you can't, just proceed with caution and put some and don't put too much medicine, but just put some extra stress coat in there just to make sure that there's no diseases getting through. But anyways, there are two main ways to catch with a net or with a rod. Now this is completely depending on what size. Let's say you have a smaller tank and you don't quite yet want a big tank. Now I do suggest definitely having at least some sort of plan to get a bigger tank, because fish, though there's a myth going around that fish go to the size of the tank, and while this is technically true, in the process of doing this, them themselves will die, and you'll give them a slow and painful death. So please make sure you have the proper tank size, a large tank for your fish. And the inch per gallon rule doesn't work as well as you think it is. It's not exact. You can't say I have a 15-inch fish, I can put it in a 20-gallon and I'm amazing. No, you can't do that. It doesn't work like that. The inch per gallon rule is not a very good rule in my opinion. I think instead you should just worry about the ammonia output, which is a lot from bass who poop a lot. So when catching your smaller bass, I suggest using either dip nets or cast nets or even the umbrella nets. Now granted, using any sort of nets is very hard to do, so just be warned that it takes a lot of skill to use nets. Anyways, next we're going to talk about rod and reel. This can go two ways. You can either use minnows and worms to try to catch it with live bait. I've done that before, it does work. Or you can use lures, which I've also caught in bass off of. So lures or live fish, either one's great. Anyways, that's how you catch a bass. I'm just going to go back, run the conclusion, and tell you a little bit about the largemouth bass. Okay, so we are back out here with my friend, the largemouth bass, who for some reason cannot get in focus. Anyways, so the largemouth bass is a very largemouth species of fish. I know that sounds weird, but they can fit a lot in their mouth, so you have to be careful with tank mates because they can eat something a lot bigger than you think they can. Also with largemouth bass, they tend to be a little bit larger. in just weight because they get a little bit fatter because they don't move as much as smallmouth. Now that does give you an advantage to the fact that they're probably just going to sit around a lot more than smallmouth. Still give them a pretty good tank though because they can still be a little bit feisty. Also worry about the fact that these are aggressive fish, so no matter if it's a smallmouth or a largemouth, they're going to fight. Now largemouth, they can take very warm temperatures. Before he was in this tank, which is a native cold water tank, he was in my tropical warm water tank, as you can see here. He outgrew this tank and started kind of bullying the other fish. Again, his aggression. This poor guy, my blue Acara, kind of got the worst of it, but he's doing much better now. So just remember to give him plenty of space and be careful with the tank mates. He likes to bully his tank mates a lot, which is unsurprising because most bass like that. I caught this guy when he was about 1 inch, and now you can see he's not very giving me good angles because he loves to stare at me. That's another thing about bass. They love to interact with you. As you can see here, he kind of follows my finger. Sometimes he does it. They never do what you say on camera. But anyways, so that's about it for bass. I'll be wrapping it up. If you liked the video, comment down below if you have any questions. And if you want to see more content like this, I keep plenty of native and tropical fish. So subscribe for more fish keeping tips, awesome live feedings, and of course, wonderful fish. This is Caleb the Fish Dude, signing off.